what's your take on all these people who say that there's competition for self-driving? Navigant Research, which was something that every single hedge fund, I personally talked to David Einhorn about this, that he was quoting, saying, look at how far behind Tesla is in self-driving. Jim Chanos is quoting that, like literally like the smartest billionaires on Wall Street are saying that Tesla's years behind on self-driving software. That was the status quo about a year ago. It seems like they've shut up about that because now engineers are like, actually Tesla and Elon are right. But I'm curious, what's your take on the competition for this sort of self-driving software?
I think Waymo is generally considered number one in the industry among most people, like Navigant Research and others. And it's a classic case of disruptive innovation, where a new technology comes in and disrupts the old way of doing things. When you had Waymo and the Google self-driving car project start in 2009, deep learning was not a thing, right? This was not a technology that existed. The data hadn't evolved to the scale where people were starting to do these things with deep learning. And now you've seen people, beat the best Go players in the world and recognize speech amazingly and do all these things using deep learning, but that just wasn't there in 2009. The data wasn't there. And that's the key, the data. Because what's the problem with self-driving cars? Why haven't these companies succeeded in 10 years? And, if you listen to them, they're not like, we're almost done. They're like, we got a long way to go. So basically to me, like, they're burning $1 billion a year. I've raised some serious eyebrows when you're working on a product for 10 years and not shipping it. And the reason why they haven't been able to ship it is the data. If I give you any piece of software, any product that I tell you can do something, how do you know if it really works? There's only one way. You have to test it, right? You have okay, if I give you a vacuum cleaner, I give you a Roomba and I go, Gali, this thing could vacuum your apartment. And you're like, okay, is it really going to vacuum my apartment? Is it going to get everywhere? Is it going to get stuck? I have to test it, right? Same thing with self-driving. In order to determine, okay, once you have a build of the software, does it work, right? And if it doesn't work, it could kill somebody. So the stakes are very high. And it needs to work if it's raining, it needs to work if it's snowing, it needs to work if it's day, if it's night, if there's a pedestrian walking. So the amount of situations that you need to account for is just astrologically huge. And the thing about Google, I've been listening to a lot of their talks to try and get a sense of, where their head is at. And they say, we've got this huge fleet of cars, but it's not really that helpful, because you take out your huge fleet of hundreds of cars and most of the data you're going to get is stuff you're already good at. Like, yeah, we can drive straight in a lane when it's sunny. That's not the big deal. What the problems tend to be that are keeping you from launching are these extremely, extremely rare events. Like, oh, it's raining and it's foggy and a biker decided to bike across and he was wearing a traffic cone on his head, like all these really bizarre situations that like you might only see it every 10,000 miles. So,
and this is the edge case debate that they say is so hard to simulate.
That's exactly right. So, you might have a 10,000 mile event, something that only occurs every 10,000 miles. Well, you need to drive 10,000 miles to see it and see if it works, right? So even if you had the perfect self-driving software, the amount of time required to test it is just astrological, right? It would take years just to validate that it works once it's perfect. So there's a strong case to be made that it's never going to happen. On the other hand, you've got Tesla. They've produced 1 million vehicles. By the end of next year, they'll be producing another 1 million vehicles a year on 3 continents. So Tesla sees these 10,000 mile events every day, whether they pay anyone to go out and test it or not, because they have stuff running on their customer cars. And they even have, more advanced stuff that they want to test running in the background and not running. So when you're trying to test, when you're trying to say, okay, this is reliable, Tesla has over 3 billion miles now. Waymo has 20 million. MB, right? Million, billion. And it's not about like, okay, Tesla has the smartest engineers or Elon Musk is a genius. But like when you put engineers in a situation where they have access to all this real driving data, not safety drivers like trying to drive safely, like real crazy people on crack driving their car like maniacs, generating real data of what real people really do. That's so valuable. I mean, with self-driving, like the first products that are going to launch are not going to be perfect. You can't make a perfect system. Perfect is the enemy of good. And humans aren't perfect. A system isn't going to be perfect. So there's going to be all these bugs, all these situations that it can't do well at first. But what can you do? If you have real data on what problems your users are really seeing, then you can focus on those. So let's say you have 5 big bugs in your system. Okay, it doesn't work with crosswalks, it doesn't work with left turns and something else. Okay, well, I can actually have hard data. 57% of my users are having the left turn issue. Okay, let's focus on that one first, because we can hit the most often use cases first and we can prioritize that way.
And we can
So the
go
bottom
into
line
the
is,
footage and like
yeah,
see what caused the see what the car is seeing when the second you disengaged, and start and go back and relabel and train it and learn from every single one of those, you know, 43% that weren't successfully executed.
Yeah, it's the data, it's the data, it's the data. It's all about the data. You know, data is the new oil, right? It's worth its weight in gold. And
right. And it's like, until another car company figures out a way to not pay a ridiculous amount per mile collecting data, like Waymo, like Uber, like Lyft, like Cruise, like Zoox,
right.
Any single self-driving company is paying engineers. It's a cost sink to train every single second. And meanwhile, Tesla is actually having customers pay them at a profit to collect that data. Like, this economic just flipping on its head is just so simple. Like, literally, Tesla gets paid, everyone else is paying. And the asset that we're talking about is the most important one. It's like the data is the new oil.